Good evening. We will start I will now call to order the September 13th, 2022 Preservation Commission meeting. It is 6:59 p.m. and we have a quorum of 7 commissioners present. So tonight we only have one case under new business, so we will go straight into that case, and I will ask staff to read the case into record, please.
Omar Gutierrez, architect, submits for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish an existing wood frame deck and stone retaining wall at the home's rear volume and construct a single-story frame addition and concrete retaining wall in the same footprint. And I believe the homeowner is going to present. Tom, when you're ready.
When do I?
Now would be fine. Yeah.
Okay. So for the record, I have to recuse myself as a result of a potential conflict of interest with this project.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Giella. I've been living in Evanston since 1999, 23 years now. We used to live in Northwest Evanston. Now we live in Southeast Evanston. And we're doing a project at our home. It's a gorgeous 1893 or 4 home right on Ridge and Dempster. It's wonderful 130-year-old charm with a lot of 130-year-old problems. So we're doing a project at our place. It's a sort of multiple phases, actually. We have a deck that's sort of all beaten down a bit. We need to replace that. We also have water that comes in through the top of we have a balcony off of the bedroom, and we have some water whenever it rains really, really hard. We get water that drips into the kitchen. So we need to replace all the flat boards. We're getting rid of a window and a door access on the second floor to seal it all off so we won't have any leaks in the kitchen again. And while we're doing that, we figured let's just close in the back area. It's where one of the patios is. We're going to just close it in, make it like a 3-season addition in the back of the house. I'm not an architect, so I can't go into specific plans. But as far as the project goes, I don't think it'll be intrusive to the neighborhood, or we have a lot of ground coverage where you really can't even see our driveway from where you are on our back porch. So it's pretty much tucked away. Won't be really, not an eyesore, but even an impediment for the neighborhood or the immediate neighbors that we have.
Tom, why don't you speak to, as best you can, the materials that you're using? I think you're matching the same siding on the home.
Yeah, everything, our architect, Omar Gutierrez, can't be here. He had a family vacation planned for about 18 months, so he's down in Florida with his family. But, we're replacing it. Everything's by code as far as the material. I think we're using the same type of flats that we have on the outside. That's the side. Yeah, that's the back of the house as you look at it. Right now, that's the current higher patio. We're going to close that in with the same material that we have up on the second floor there, you can see. That's the one window we're taking out on the right there. We think some of the water could be seeping through there into the kitchen. There's also a door right to the left of that window we're taking out, which we're going to close that off as well. That leads to our master bedroom. That one right there. To the see it. It's right above, right around there. It should be there. It looks like it's
Rendered as a window.
okay. Yeah, it should be a door that goes out to the balcony, and that's where I think a lot of the rain piles up and goes either from the door or the bathroom window, or it could be, they said, even the slats on the house, because it's been pretty old. It just goes through it on a real heavy rain. So we have right below that, where the back door is going up to the house. That's our kitchen area. And we have a lot of water dripping down when it really pours. So we think if we get rid of the window, get rid of the door, and replace the whole side with new flats that match the house identically, that should solve the problem, which we hope. We'll still have a lower deck there, that we're not going to change that, we'll keep that. But the upper deck, we'll just close it off, make it a three-way. All the windows would match the same windows as we have on the house, and it'll be, an identical to what we have at the main house.
And the transom windows here, that's existing, I think it's on, you have an existing like four-season room that also has those?
Don't know, I think we're gonna match. Yeah, that's right, we replaced those windows recently when we redid those windows. We had original, but over the course of time, we've replaced windows in the house, and replaced those in the kitchen breakfast nook area with those transom windows. We're gonna use the same transom windows for the extension all around it. Okay. Yep. See that there. If you hold to that, yeah, that's the front of the house addition. We'll do the same thing. That's sort of the sunroom in the front of the house, which I think was put on years ago. But we'll do the same type of thing for the back of the house. So it'll match exactly.
And I'm sorry if you already mentioned this. What type of windows are you proposing?
The ones that match the house will be the transom up top, and then the identical windows that we have in the upper bedroom and the back of the house, you can see they'll match identically.
And there'll be a wood with an aluminum clad on the exterior?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay. One other question I actually had was, and I'd be interested to hear comments from my fellow commissioners on this item. I realize that the addition is in the back of the house and it's not really visible from public way in a significant way. I was curious if you thought about continuing the band from the front porch around to kind of break up the massing of the parapet wall. There's the molding that's on the front porch. I'm not necessarily opposed to doing it the way that's proposed, because I realize that's how the addition looks right now. But it was just something that kind of drew my eye, was the massing of the height of the parapet wall and how it aligned with the front. And since there was already this like kind of datum on the front, I was curious, and maybe this is an item for discussion, but if there are any questions, or if you would like to speak to what your architect and you thought about it, if you even considered that.
So you're saying, why are we not doing the same thing that looks like that in the back? I think it's the same. Well, I know, I'm not.
So here you have like a crown molding, like a molding piece, right?
Right.
So on the back proposed addition, you're doing a flat parapet wall that just has the siding. And I was just wondering if there was a way to bring that, it's almost like a line that goes around the home. And
I got it, okay.
It was just more of a question of if you had thought about that.
I actually haven't thought about it, but I can check with it. I think it may look nicer, actually, if we can do that.
Are there any other questions?
I mean, I had a similar question about continuing or somehow breaking up that. So I don't know if I'm ready for discussion now or just questions, right?
Okay, can you go back to the image,
I think we can ask questions now. I mean, it's one
to
case.
the elevation that shows it?
Or the renderings, maybe.
So I do have some questions pertaining to that. So the small addition that's on the deck now, are you keeping that small portion and butting up against it, or are you rebuilding that little notch there?
The lower one?
No,
That one right there, the main one.
Yes, exactly, right there.
Yeah, we'll have, that's the stairway going up right now to the back door, we'll keep that. But as you're going up the stairs, there'll be a door on the left
But-
that goes into the three-season room.
But that form there that's between the bold outlined addition and the main house, that's that part of the rear addition that's already there, correct? And so it looks like you were really just trying to match everything on that part of the house. Well, can we go to the existing photos?
Yeah.
Yeah, right there in the middle. Is that piece staying there?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that that's how we got to the height of the parapet and the window detailing, et cetera. So, and I will echo your comments about the height of that and wanting to see a little bit different treatment in terms of trim or an eave or a frieze board or cornice or something. And you do have a great example of it on the front of the house. So I'm assuming that that is not original, that piece that we're looking at. Do we know that? Yeah,
I don't think so.
okay, okay. So no historical significance to that portion that we're looking at. Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
And that part will be closed in when we put the cover over the, so basically, it's, right now, it's outdoor, but once we cover it, it will be covered. It won't be an outdoor window anymore.
okay. And I think also relevant to this discussion is the choice of the double hung with the transom above it. I think it works effectively right now because this addition is pushed so far back from the south face of the home right now, and the new addition is essentially aligning with that and has a whole other window motif. And so I'm thinking, anyway, this is up for discussion, that maybe a better window choice would have been to match the more closely adjacent south wall windows.
South wall window, okay, so that would be, yeah, right,
Right around the bay,
yeah, those
Yes.
off the living room.
yes.
I think they may, I don't know if they have a transom on those windows.
I feel like those two sets of windows are kind of fighting each other a little bit. I think they're both beautiful in their own right, but they're, and historical in their own right, but right up against each other without a little bit more of a break there, I'm not sure that should stay that way.
You're saying continue what we have in the living room, those windows, and continue that throughout the
Yes.
addition?
Yes.
Was there a reason why you prefer the transom, or were you merely just trying to match the front?
Just going with the architect, I have no
Okay.
idea.
I do think going with the single window will be more cost-effective than doing the transom plus another window, so below, so that
Could
might.
save me money, that may be good, that may be worth looking into. Yeah, okay.
But, I mean, as long as there wasn't an aesthetic preference,
Yeah, and again, nothing's been ordered because we want to have this thing passed first, and then we can figure out what windows we need. So yeah, that actually makes sense. I mean, to follow through, I go two ways. One, if you're sitting inside, the windows in the addition would match the ones that are in the kitchen nook. If you're looking from the outside, they don't match. So if you have one that matches the living room and continues on, from the outside it matches, from the inside it'll be different than looking at the kitchen with the transom windows and the windows that look like the living room. So I can go either way.
are there any other questions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Carlos.
When you look at the proposed windows and the width of the proposed windows versus to the ones that you would like to maintain, which is to the, do you think will be any problem with the proportion of the narrow window versus the wider window?
That's a good question, because you're immediately going to get into the mutton and the pane pattern and notice quite a difference there. So I think I'll leave that up to the homeowner and the architect, whether or not they want to you would effectively have to reduce the number of windows on the addition in order to make them all a little bit wider. You would end up with the same glass. This also will save you money. There'll be less window units.
Okay.
But it would get you more in the proportion of the existing windows that we're trying to kind of resemble. That's a good point, Carlos.
Okay, so if you look at the ones in the living room, those are bigger windows,
Wider, yes.
wider, okay.
So it might break up the nice rhythm that you've got going there, so, but I don't want to get too deep into redesigning it from that perspective.
I mean, if I look at, though, the elevation on the, what is it, the south, or the proposed south, it doesn't look like they're that far off, though, as far as width. Like, they're not as, they're fairly comparable, that I
Yeah,
don't think you would
I think
notice
you're
it.
right.
So
It
I
looked
don't
different.
think you're gonna have a problem with the divisions visually as much as maybe the rendering suggested it.
But the photo looks different, and this is a rendering. I don't know which one is accurate. I would go by the photo. Can you put back the photo again, please? It's hard to say. And they're even further away. So,
I think either way, as long as they're cognizant of that issue when they bring it back.
Yeah,
It's a good
yeah.
point to bring up, though.
not those windows, the windows that are on the living room, I guess.
Yeah, look on the south side view. No, that's the eastern.
There isn't a photo?
I
thought
don't
we
think,
were.
no, because that's
Oh, okay.
the front, that's the front.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
What was the reasoning for keeping the lower portion open with the piers?
I think there's an entrance,
The bank, those doors?
Underneath, you mean?
Yeah,
That's the old garage.
the old garage,
is in the
okay.
house.
All right.
I think that was a nice choice, and I assume it's also going to help save your 30-something inch elm you've got over there in the corner there.
The 30-inch what?
30-something inch wide elm tree that's
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're going to, fortunately, we saved it by a few inches. If it was 4 or 5 inches closer, they had to take it down. So fortunately, we were able to save the tree. And
But I think you're also going to be doing a lot less damage to the root structure, hopefully.
yeah,
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm not personally bothered by the transom windows in the back because it's in the front, that pattern as well, because there's an addition off the front too, on one of these pictures that's shown, so it has those, I don't know, the full ones with the transom next to it. It's kind of repeated in the back. But I did just want to, I guess, echo what Chair Reinhold said. I think it would be a nice touch to have that molding or some treatment repeated in the back as well.
okay. That would be on the top, so along there.
Yeah, it would be the fascia board plus the eave.
Right, okay.
Are there any other questions?
Well, not a question, just a discussion.
Discussion? Why don't we have Tom sit down, please, and then we'll just go through a discussion amongst commissioners, and we
Okay.
can,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, Mark, all right, you want to?
I mean, to echo what both of you said, I mean, I was really struck by the kind of large plain surface above the windows on the addition, and I didn't understand why it was there because it seems, you know, it doesn't have any, either the band or the moldings or anything else the rest of the house does. And I guess I understand now from the presentation that there was an effort made to match the, you know, the small existing addition that this is somewhat, you know, an expansion of. But I think when you expand it to a much larger surface, it really strikes you more as kind of a big, blocky, plain area. And I'm not, I mean, looking at it, I'm not sure, you know, if the band went around, you know, whether it would work exactly where it would strike the addition. I mean, it looks like there would be, if you just extended the band, there might be wall still above it, which might not work. But I do think some kind of molding or, is it gutter at the roof line all around that creates the protrusion on the rest of the house? At the roof line? Yeah, like here on that sunroom there.
Yeah, and the existing addition in the photo just has a scupper penetration through the parapet, so,
But the appearance of I think the gutter above it still is much more, breaks up the very flat surface, and it just, I think it doesn't, the addition won't really be anywhere equal to the rest of the house in quality without, some effort to break up the plane surface.
And I think that relates, Mark, to standard for construction 4, rhythm of solids to voids in the facade.
Yeah. I have, actually have a question. I don't know if I'm still allowed to ask a question, but is there still access to that roof now? Or are you taking out the door?
There is access, but we never use it. And it's more of a hassle knowing the rain that comes in, so we don't use it. So if we lose the door, we'll put a window up there, which will be fine.
So then, so why build the parapet up high?
Why build it up high?
Yeah.
I think for the roof, to have enough headspace in the closet area.
Okay.
I think it might partially be, Beth, because they're keeping that small addition that
To
already
match-
has
to
the
match
high.
that.
Yeah, that's my guess.
I would, again, design-wise, I would almost take that one down and then build lower the bigger addition.
They'd get more views out the windows that I think are partially covered, but I think what might be the issue here, and I know you're thinking about, is, yes, if you can bring all that down, but it may also be
Eyeball.
doing double duty as a guard. And so I don't know that I want a guardrail.
But for people that don't,
Yeah,
but
so
there won't be a door
it
there
may not be
anymore.
a deck per se, but somebody might go out there on occasion, in which case it would serve as a protective guard for somebody falling over
wait.
the side.
Wait, was the door going to be removed or going to stay?
Yeah, the door will be removed, and I think a window will be in its place.
Yeah, okay. So that's what I was thinking. Once the door goes, then sure, you can walk out, you can get out your window, but, it's not as convenient. So then consider taking down just the parapet wall, just that part, so that then you have a nice sloped roof, you have a nice gutter similar to the front. Again, my concern is just the scale of that upper part of the wall. Kind of looks like you have these really nice eyes, like the windows, a really big forehead, no eyebrows. So and so you need something there, or you just lower the forehead, lower the parapet, which is that top of the wall. Yeah, exactly, because again, I don't want to get too into design, but it's just a concern with the massing there, with the scale of that parapet to the rest of the addition. And you're right, I understand matching that, kind of that nook that's already there, but that's a lot less work than building all that parapet that's going to be new. So,
You can actually see some of the structural gymnastics involved in that in the red markup on there.
good point. Good point.
I think it might be possible too for, as a commission, if this is something we feel comfortable doing, is if the drawings get modified to have that decorative fascia and eave come back with a simple roof to be administratively reviewed. It's going to take them a little bit of looking into it. I'm sure that you'll want to talk to your architect about it to make sure it works out. But either that or the possibility of bringing that trim back in to break up this massing. I think
Right.
we should be able to give maybe some direction either or, so that then it could be handled through administrative review, if the commissioners would be okay with something like that.
Your point is that if you don't have access to the balcony, you don't need that parapet, you can just level the top of the kitchen, that roof, level that to the top of the extension. But make it one level.
Yeah, and basically mimic your your front. Yeah. I mean, it's something that you can discuss with your architect to find out if there were reasons behind it and how it works out with the project. But what I'd like to propose is that we give you an option for both tonight. And then depending on what you and your architect decide to do, you can work with Kate and Carlos and submit it, if everything thinks that that would be suitable. So right now I have the comments being that the commissioners would like to see the rhythm of the solid to voids addressed, which is the parapet massing above your windows. And to do that, I think the idea is to bring around the existing trim that is already on the front porch and on the south elevation, and to mimic that around above your windows with the fascia board and the eave, and possibly a gutter if the parapet actually goes away in its entirety. The other comment was the configuration of the windows, and what is the consensus of commissioners on the transom versus just doing a single hung window in the opening? I myself do not have a preference, either or, since they're both on the home.
I agree. I don't have a preference.
John, how strongly do you feel about?
I feel strongly, but I will accept if I'm in the minority here. I will say that I understand so many of these older homes that we look at have lots of different kinds of windows, and we don't have to be matchy-matchy on everything. I'm really okay with that. I'm perfectly fine with those transom window treatment on the existing addition. What tips me into it should match is how closely they are related to each other, the existing bay, living room windows, and the addition windows, and that's what makes me feel strongly that it should be more matching.
So let me ask this question. If there was an option to keep the configuration proposed in this submission, or alternatively change it to a single hung window with the Muntin configuration to match the existing windows, how does that strongly affect commissioners' viewpoints?
I mean, I kind of agree with John. I mean, I'm looking at both elevations, like, the rear elevation, the transom configuration, ties in with that nook, but then if you look at the other elevation, like you said, it because of its placement, it does tie in. So I'm kind of torn. I don't know which one, but I think I would lean towards the single unit, the single window.
Amanda, you had a comment about the transom. How strongly do you feel about?
Not terribly strongly, but I'm totally fine with the transom because it is on the front and it is juxtaposed next to single hung on the front. So it kind of, for me, it looks like it's repeating. So I'm not offended by it at all.
Well, I guess then we need to make a decision just on how we want to propose a motion with recommendations so that people know exactly what they are voting on.
I'm fine with providing that alternate, and then if I was a homeowner, I would price them both out and help. If I was a homeowner, I would let that help guide my decision. So I'm fine with having that as an option.
Would everybody find that to be acceptable if it's administratively reviewed then, once the homeowner has decided on the?
Yeah, I'm fine with the homeowner making that decision and having it administratively reviewed.
Okay. Are there any other items that you would like to discuss? Or is the massing, or the rhythm of the solids to the voids and the configuration of the windows the only things? Okay.
Sorry, does that include the trim, a trim piece that we're talking, okay.
So we'll do a trim piece that matches the existing, or they will just remove the parapet in theory. So is someone willing to make a motion with the recommendations for either the parapet goes away and it matches the roof shape and the trim on the front? or if it stays, this trim still obviously comes and continues through. And then we have the alternate for the configuration of the windows to change to a single hung window with administrative review. John, do you feel
I'll take a stab at it.
confident?
Okay.
Thank you.
So regarding 1247 Ridge Avenue, Ridge Historic District, case 22 Pres 0165, I move that we conditionally issue a certificate of appropriateness to Omar Gutierrez, architect, to demolish an existing wood frame deck and stone retaining wall at the home's rear volume and construct a single-story frame addition and concrete retaining wall in the same footprint. Applicable standards: demolition 1 through 5, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 5, 7 through 8, and 10 through 15. Those conditions being as follows: that we would like a administrative staff review of the height of the parapet wall in relation to the option of either lowering the parapet wall or adding a trim piece to break up the mass of it. And the second condition being again, an option to change the window configuration to single hung to more closely match the adjacent living room bay in lieu of the double hung with transom.
Is there a second?
I second.
Amanda seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The motion carries. It is 6-0, since Sarah will not be voting. So then, once you have made those decisions and you've discussed with your architect, you can discuss with Kate and Carlos, and then you should be on your way. Thank you.
You can always reach out to me, to Tom. You can call me and we can discuss. And I don't remember when Omar's back in town, but we can set up a time to.
As far as just, technical aspects of what you all talked about, is that going to come to me in a written form?
Yes, absolutely. I'll consolidate that and kind of distill it and get it to you, and then we can set up a time where we can talk with Omar. And that won't, since you're in for permit, that won't impact any of the previous reviews that are happening. So you should be on the same general track for issuance of that.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Okay, Kate, you want to go to our next item of business for the approval of the meeting minutes?
Okay. I did not receive any comments from anyone, so unless anyone has any revisions now, I think we could take a motion for approval.
I did not have any revisions. Would someone like to make a motion to approve? Mark,
I move to approve the minutes of the July 12, 2022 meeting.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Sarah seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Beth abstained. Okay. If we want to move on to discussion.
Okay, I think I'll do these a little out of order. I think I'll save the longer discussion item for last. So I'll just give some brief staff updates. The first is the Downtown Heritage Resource Survey. We've conducted 2 of the 3 surveys so far. The last is scheduled for, I think, September 20th. Next steps with that will be kind of distilling that information into a more polished set of survey forms, and then we'll also create a draft survey report that then we'll bring the commission to review. But really, it's just, this is more of a resource, kind of a planning tool and resource for future planning efforts in the downtown. So I don't think we'll have any, like, sometimes survey reports have a set of recommendations. I don't know if we'll need that necessarily. So we're well on our way. I think that'll probably be something that we'll look at by the end of the year to get in front of the commission. And then the second of three that we'll look at is a legacy business pilot program, which this is an initiative that's actually in the long-range work plan that was identified, maybe 6 to 8 months ago, and it's something that we started work on. What do you think? That was probably 2 months ago that we started work on that. So we have bi-weekly meetings. Susie and Carl are on that subcommittee. And then there's also 2 council members, and then the economic development manager and myself. And to date, we've looked at eligibility criteria, and we've looked at kind of a purpose and goal statement for the program. And now we've identified, I think the list is at 30 kind of pilot candidates that we looked at after taking an inventory of businesses in Evanston. I think we created a list of, it's got to be somewhere close to 200, 300 businesses and their age of incorporation. And it's pretty remarkable the amount that have had a really significant amount of longevity in Evanston. I mean, there's some on there that are, 100-year-old businesses, which are pretty neat, and quite a few that are, 30, 40, 50 years old.
Kate, I have a question. Who are the council people who are on the committee with Susie and Carl?
So Councilmember Nguyen, who's from the 3rd Ward, and also Councilmember Kelly, who's from the 1st Ward.
All right, so 1st and 3rd. The other question I had is how are you identifying these businesses? Are they?
So the initial intent when we identified these 30, the intent is not necessarily to like register these as legacy businesses. What we're trying to do is create kind of like a steering committee of sorts where they would participate in these working group meetings to kind of guide our process and give us feedback. I think once this program is actually created, the intent is that people would self-nominate under the criteria that are established.
I mean, did you like ask businesses to tell you how long they'd been in business? How did you have the data that you just
So
referenced?
some of the data came from, I think, the Economic Development Division, and then also some research that Carl did on his own. And then we actually did, I think, on maybe 4 or 5 occasions, we put out requests for information in the city newsletter, the Economic Development newsletter. We received a lot of responses from residents that identified longstanding businesses that they thought contributed either culturally or socially. So we received a lot that way. And yeah, I think it's somewhere close to 300 in this kind of inventory that we've looked at. And then we tried to identify within this 30, it's not just the 30 oldest, it's, we tried to add diversity in the type of use, the type of business, the type of ownership, age, to try to really get a diverse collective to kind of steer this process for us.
Yeah, I was more just wondering where the information came from about the businesses, how long they had been around. You were saying some of them had been in business for over 100 years, so I just wondered how you knew that. So it was.
So I can just
Variety
say,
of sources.
that it was a very, very quick survey. I mean, there wasn't really a lot of, research done a lot of it was just from, business websites or, just visiting them and just like asking, I know you've been around for a long time, how long have you been in operation? And the intent was just to like get a number, like, how many we have in the city, and that was kind of surprising how many we had. And the diversity of like location too. It wasn't just in the downtown, it was all over in the 5th Ward, the 1st Ward, 3rd Ward. Almost every ward had a long-standing business. So.
Yeah, I think the 5th Ward has a fair number of these older businesses. So you were getting some response from them or getting information from them?
And I think it is the intent of the committee to make it very inclusive and not to just narrow it down to what you would anticipate. So, and I will say, as far as the preservation involvement in this legacy business pilot program, other than the fact that Carl and I have been involved in the meetings, the preservation aspect and the eligibility for that part of this program has not really, that will be many steps after. I think the initial push is to really just get the pilot program out there, get it known, get a website known, and help involve the community members. And then the hope is to eventually build on that and then kind of bring it into like some incentive programs and some ideas that we have for our surveying and all that stuff. So I think as that kind of gets wrapped in, it will involve the commission a little bit more. But as of right now, I don't, from what Carl and I have been involved in, I don't think it's something that's intruding too much onto the preservation aspects in our.
Yeah, I think the initial kind of scope and maybe the easy part is kind of a celebratory and promotional tool. I think the more difficult task is creating kind of a robust incentive framework, what that looks like. And I think that is probably a long ways off. And this is something that, too, would have to be adopted by the city council. So it's, I think this is very early in its infancy, but I think it has a lot of potential.
Just a follow-up question. Are all of the businesses that were identified, are they bricks and mortar? And if not, then there might be an opportunity to identify long-term home-based businesses before the work-from-home trend became necessary because of the pandemic. But, you know, just a lot of businesses that have been run by a single person out of their home,
Yeah,
or
and
the family out of the home.
I
for
think the
ages.
initial scope that we looked at was like brick and mortar businesses because that was easier for us to kind of identify. But I think when you open up this self-nomination process, I think you will get more. And I think there's some conversations too to open it up to nonprofits as well. There's some very old nonprofits in Evanston that have been around 100, 120 years in some instances.
Okay, can you remind us how the project was conceived, or not necessarily by the commission, correct?
I think the project, the idea, I think, was somewhat born out of conversations with commission members, informal conversations over the last year. And I think it's something that the Economic Development Department sees as a way to revitalize some of these business districts, as well as just celebrate and promote businesses that have been around for this long and survived any number of recessions and calamities and rent increases and development pressures. It's pretty remarkable that a business can exist for 10 years, not alone 50, 60, 100 years. So I think that's how it first came to be. It's somehow, this is tied into, there's a separate economic development program called the Evanston Thrives Initiative, which is looking at how the 9 different business districts in Evanston, how they, how they're still thriving and what resources still exist and what they're known for and what those stories are. And that's something that I think is out in its draft form. Actually, if you walk around town, there's a few window installations in vacant storefronts about Evanston Thrives, about these different business districts. So I think those things are pretty interconnected at this point. I do think right now it's primarily seen as like an economic development tool, preservation-based economic development. But I think that it will have a significant focus on promoting and preserving cultural identity as well. And it is pretty remarkable when you map some of these out that the majority of the locations where these businesses exist are the smaller, older business districts. It's not necessarily the downtown. It's primarily, Central Street, Main Dempster Mile, portions of Chicago Avenue, on Dodge Avenue. And I think part of that is just the lower rent structures that exist. It allows these businesses to really just kind of preserve. So looking at ways that we can further incentivize that in the future, I think those are discussions that are really far down the road, but I think we'll get there.
Kate, I think you were touching on it there, but so in addition to like the promotion piece, is the end goal like that resources would open up to some of these legacy businesses in some way if you qualify?
Yeah, I think so. There will be separate, there's, at least right now, we're looking at eligibility criteria generally for what does it mean to be registered as a legacy business. then there will be a separate incentive framework, and then there will be a separate set of qualifications you would need to meet to apply for those incentives. So not everyone that's a legacy business would be able to access the same incentives. That might be based on a demonstration of some kind of threat that exists to that business, versus a business that's 100 years old but is very prosperous and doing very well. That should be celebrated, but there shouldn't necessarily be the same access to incentives, I think.
Thank you, Kate. I think it was very important to go over the genesis of an intent. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions with that, I know the document, which we've called Preserve 2040, the 2040 is a reference to the kind of the end point that the projection of the plan when we think we're hoping that these initiatives would be utilized. The document itself is relatively long, so I tried to boil it down into a presentation here that really kind of hits on some of the key points and then some of the key initiatives that were identified by the subcommittee as either being pressing or urgent or high in priority. And this is probably I said 6 to 8 months, I think, but this is probably something that was somewhat at the genesis when Mark was chair and I first started with the commission, and this is something we kind of discussed looking at, and it's slowly kind of evolved into this document that I think is exciting to bring before everybody. And then I also did bring a copy, if we can pass it down, of the original plan, which was done in 1980, which is pretty neat. Most of those goals and initiatives have really been realized in that plan. There's a few outliers, like a district designation in Northwest Evanston is a recommendation that was never realized. And then the Oakton district not being a local district is something that isn't identified. But some of the really significant initiatives in that plan, such as binding design review, is something that we achieved in the early 90s. Designation of the Northeast Historic District, all those things came out of this plan, which is a significant document, but I think it's, clear that, I think I wrote in there that also in the 1980s, like the very first Macintosh computer came out or something. So you put it into perspective about how far things have progressed culturally, as well as in the profession of preservation. I think it's time for a forward-thinking, clear path to the future. So really the purpose and utilization of the plan, the document, it should be the commission's principal policy document. So the commission is given charge by the city council to oversee preservation, the city's cultural heritage, and then the Preservation Commission is given pretty wide breadth in how they achieve that, whether it's through their rules of circumstance for administrative reviews or commission reviews, as well as a really kind of a litany of powers and duties. I think there's something like 30 in the ordinance. So that's primarily would have oversight by the Preservation Commission as the primary body that oversees preservation, the city's cultural heritage. And then because, everyone up here on the dais, other than Carlos and myself, we're, you're volunteers. So this would be principally facilitated through the city's planning and zoning division, through staff planners. But also, and I think more importantly, it would be supported and implemented by partner organizations and volunteers. The previous plan, as I said, was developed in 1980. And I think what we're trying to do is create accountable benchmarks for the implementation of preservation initiatives, advocate for adjusting policy when needed and warranted, and integrate preservation planning policies and strategies into other city decisions, plans, goals, and priorities. This is just kind of an overview of how the plan is organized. There's a set of key objectives. The key objectives are the planning objectives, so going through the process, what we're trying to achieve. There's an overall mission statement, a series of vision statements, some value statements, which are really core beliefs that the commission has for the stewardship of the city's architectural and cultural heritage resources. And then there's a set of specific goals, policies, and initiatives. And these are organized around really the four kind of legs of the stool of any successful preservation program. These are survey and documentation. That's really the foundation of any program, understanding what exists in your community, what its significance is. Program administration and resource management. That's really how the program functions and how you do binding design review, how you manage these resources so that they remain vibrant for the future. Community revitalization is really looking at like preservation-based economic development tools. And then education and advocacy is how do you promote and instill kind of a preservation ethic within the community? What is the value of preservation? These were the key objectives that we looked at when we started the planning process. We wanted to propose a program of outreach, education, and advocacy that builds community awareness and stewardship. Determine future survey and documentation priorities. As I said in the plan in the 1980s, they identified number future of survey and documentation priorities. Nearly all of those have been realized. Consider additional historic and cultural context and their associated resources. This is just really evidence of how preservation has moved forward since 1980 as you're looking at different groups of people, different stories, different cultural associations of buildings. It's not just about architectural resources. Assess the effectiveness of the current ordinance, as well as the Commission's operations and the viability and capacity of partner organizations to implement the plan. I think this one's really important. Align the preservation program with the city's climate action plan, affordable housing program, and economic development goals and strategies. I think, I really believe in the power of preservation, and I think it has a lot to contribute in all of these areas. Determine the barriers to implementing the program. I think this is also really important, is to look at creating a robust incentive framework. We currently don't have any incentives in Evanston. I think that's really a hindrance to the success of the program. Create new organizational approaches that build local capacity and diverse community involvement, instead of really the weight of all of this being on the commission and on city staff. I think looking at ways that you can reactivate and activate partner organizations to help in that work is very important. And then create an action-oriented work plan. So this isn't just goals and policies, it's actually looking at specific initiatives that can be undertaken. The mission statement generally, as a broad statement, is just to enhance the quality of life for all Evanston residents and visitors through the ongoing work and benefits of historic preservation. I like this photo. It's in context, too, of what we're talking about, the Legacy Business Program. This is the north side of Davis Street. This is the only landmark in the photo. It still exists, the university building on the corner of Chicago and Davis. Everything else you see here is largely either a vacant lot or it's a bank drive-through in this photo. So when you look at the ability for small scale, human scale, lower rent structures, older buildings that are adaptable, all of that contributes to the vibrancy of a business district. So it's not just about preserving the architectural resources, it's about preserving the opportunities for small business to be retained in downtown, for the character of downtown and other business districts to be retained as well. The vision statement is, it's a little lengthy, so I broke it up into a few paragraphs here, but this is really, you're looking at where do you want to be in 2040. So let's imagine in the future where we want to be. So Evanston, Illinois is one of Midwestern America's most vibrant places, a city known for its rich historic, cultural, architectural, and environmental legacy. The Evanston Preservation Commission and community at large has fostered that legacy through careful planning and stewardship of Evanston's historic, cultural, architectural, and environmental resources by engaging a diverse group of residents, local stakeholders, and policymakers on the benefits of historic preservation. In turn, these efforts have enhanced sustainability and accessibility, identified endangered resources, and registered new resources, especially those not previously acknowledged as significant, celebrated and stabilized neighborhood character, solidified preservation as an economic development tool, and promoted the increased appreciation of Evanston's diverse cultural heritage. The Evanston Preservation Commission, City of Evanston, school districts, Northwestern University, and other private sector and nonprofit organizations maintain ongoing partnerships through meaningful advocacy efforts, preservation planning initiatives, and expanded educational resources and financial incentives. The value statements, I think these are very important. There's 13 of these. These are really the core beliefs of the preservation program in Evanston. So as we review all of this, I think it's important too to note that all of this is up for debate and discussion and revision, and we can take as long as we want, especially considering that, hopefully this document lives on long into the future. So these core beliefs, Evanston's cultural and architectural resources are tangible links to its current and past identities. Future landmark and district designations keep pace with evolving preservation trends and aspirations for future identities. Preservation embodies inherent sustainability and is essential to climate resilience. A Preservation Commission membership that reflects Evanston's demographics supports a more representative, equitable, diverse, and inclusive program. Enhancing public-private partnerships and capacities promotes broad community involvement, advocacy, and educational outreach. And effective municipal leadership supports positive preservation outcomes. An effective, well-managed, and well-staffed preservation program facilitates positive community outcomes. A commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion within municipal preservation programming facilitates positive community outcomes. Preservation promotes Evanston as a residential city of choice in the Chicago region. Preservation contributes to vibrant, human-scaled environments. Preservation is a revitalization and economic development tool for small businesses and neighborhood business districts. Evanston's historic resources are integral to community identity and placemaking and bind its residents to their physical environment. Effective community partnerships and ongoing technical assistance advance a preservation advocacy ethic in Evanston. Annual reporting of performance trends and benchmarks promote transparency and trust with the public the Commission serves. This is a lovely photo of the Orrington Hotel before the addition at the top. One of the other things we noted in the vision statement is the addition of some oversight over environmental resources, and I think some of these photos are interesting, and you look at the tree canopy. Obviously, these are all elm trees that I'm sure were impacted by Dutch elm disease, but it's a significant change from what's existing now. So now we'll look at the various goals and policies. These first set of goals and policies relate to survey and documentation, which I said was really kind of the foundation of an effective preservation program, really understanding what resources exist in your community. So the goal is to identify and preserve resources significant to Evanston's identity, heritage, and vibrancy. The policies that we would support and ask the city to support and partner organizations also to support are initiatives that continue to identify and document Evanston's heritage resources, but not just to support the, identifying these, but to support designation of significant resources as landmarks and historic districts as recommended through survey and documentation efforts. Some of the priority initiatives here, there are many, but these were either listed as pressing or high. Prioritize new areas in Evanston for survey and documentation. Conduct a citywide survey of Evanston's downtown and neighborhood business district resources. Some of that we're already undertaking with the downtown survey. Document and include the built resources that embody historic, social, and cultural periods and events, and the groups and people who have contributed to Evanston's unique character and identity. Integrate preservation survey and documentation efforts as part of future planning efforts. Advocate for designation of the Oakton district as a local district. That's something that residents email me about frequently. There's a lot of alterations that happen. Nominate Evanston's historic downtown resources and other business district resources to the National Register. There's really no resource management involved with that, but what it allows them to do is access tax credits and other financial resources. Prepare neighborhood conservation district plans and support additional neighborhood planning. We can talk about that, but really conservation district planning is kind of referred to as like preservation light. Basically, it's a community-driven, neighborhood-driven preservation plan. So you're basically reaching out to the community, asking them what resources they think are significant, and asking them how they would manage them. Goal 2, this is enhance the ability to protect and promote significant heritage and cultural resources through updated ordinances and additional preservation-based tools. So the first policy is to maintain an up-to-date preservation ordinance which mimics nationwide best practices and trends. I think we've done that to a large part. I think our ordinance is effective. I think it has some changes that could occur and some that were recommended in this document. Adopt new preservation tools and also incentives. So just some quick priorities. Review and update the preservation ordinance. Support the creation of a framework for permit fee waivers if recommended by the commission. That's a really significant incentive for some homeowners, especially landmark properties that are more vernacular in nature, that have trouble maintaining them to the level that our standards really require. Support amending the zoning code to include a section for adaptive use of historic properties. That could probably more generally just be having an adaptive use code. It doesn't have to be specific to historic properties, but it's certainly a preservation tool. Support creation of a legacy business program. That's somewhat the work we're doing now was born out of this. Reinstate facade improvement incentives for historic commercial buildings. Establish a neighborhood conservation district program. Benchmark commission accomplishments and performance trends in an annual public report. That would be given to City Council. And then actively recruit future commissioners with a focus on building a membership reflective of Evanston's diverse demographics. That's kind of proven to be a difficult task, but it's something that we should continue to do. Goal number 3 is, this is really community revitalization based. Encourage adaptive use and rehabilitation projects which spur preservation-based economic development and retain vibrant and contextual built fabric. The policies here are to support planning and development that advance preservation and community revitalization priorities, coordinate and expand heritage tourism activities and programming. There's very little of that exists currently. We'd have to kind of gauge the appetite for it, and that's something partner organizations would probably take on a larger role. Certainly the History Center probably does the most out of this. Integrate and expand preservation priorities which align with climate action and resilience goals. I think that's very important. And then the priority initiatives here, which were either pressing or high, explore creation of a downtown revolving loan or venture fund. This is kind of a preservation-based economic development tool. I think a venture fund is maybe a little more realistic than a revolving loan fund, but it would look at essentially providing funding for smaller, like startup businesses. Collaborate with special service areas, the Chamber of Commerce, broader business community to identify and advance preservation priorities. Target community development block grant funds in areas of newly created neighborhood conservation districts. Advocate for the creation of a citywide deconstruction ordinance. This is one that Susie emailed me about because I think it's somewhat of a newer topic, but essentially what you would look at is instead of demolishing a building and throwing all those materials into the landfill, buildings would actually be deconstructed. So there's a number of tools there. One is it's economic development based, it's workforce development. It takes more people to deconstruct a building. You would then salvage and sort the materials, and then you would sell those materials. So there's an affordability aspect of that when you're supporting affordable housing, is that you can access cheaper and higher quality building materials from buildings that are deconstructed. And then there's obviously climate resilience and environmental benefits to all of this as well. Utilize incentives for historic property owners for salvaging and reusing existing materials. That's another one to kind of, I think, to try to offset the cost because it is more expensive to do that. Support retention of significant landscape features. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then last but not least, because I think this is really, again, this is a core of preservation planning, is really how you look at your education and advocacy efforts. So the goal is to advocate for the power of preservation and its ability to sustain and enhance a high quality of life for all residents. 3 policies: create new educational tools that inform design professionals, contractors, developers, residents, and civic leaders on the benefits of preserving and adapting historic structures. continue to disseminate and publicize educational content utilizing the internet and other digital platforms. We actually have a lot of older educational content and preservation tools that just haven't been digitized, that really came out of the 70s and 80s. And then conduct annual fundraising events, educational programs, and training opportunities. Priority initiatives here: reinstate a quarterly preservation and design-oriented newsletter. This is something I think they had through the 80s, and then it's kind of gone away. Prepare preservation training publications and one-on-one orientation for elected officials. Compile and publish a list of restoration professionals that do work in Evanston. Establish a brief guest lecture series for monthly commission meetings. This is a model that Oak Park follows. They invite one or two individuals to present at their commission meetings, and it's done at the start of the meeting. It's like 10 to 15 minutes. It's just a nice informational session and educational tool, not just for the commissioners, but for residents and applicants that are in the room as well. And then support partner organizations in the creation of preservation-oriented lectures and workshops. And with that, I'll close on this beautiful photo of Fountain Square. You can see City Hall in the background, which was demolished, as well as this lovely department store, which was removed as well. It's just a beautiful photo. And then I think we'll just open it up to kind of broad discussion and conversation. As I said, we can really revise this as long as we want, add to it, delete aspects of it. If there's portions that make people uncomfortable or something, we can remove those. So I don't want you to feel like this is like a baked product, because it's not. It's very definitely in its draft form.
Kate, question for you. What is the goal tonight? Just to have a discussion? We're not voting on this tonight, correct?
No, yeah, I don't really anticipate that we would vote on this for the next couple of meetings, probably. I think it's important to get it out of the subcommittee, where we spent, quite a good time really kind of refining it. So opening it up to the full commission, as well as just making it a public document, I think is really important too. So we'll just review and revise and receive feedback and move forward, and then whenever we're comfortable, that could be in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more months if needed, we can adopt the document. And then once we adopt it, it would be presented to the Planning and Development Committee.
Okay, does this document replace or conflict or dovetail with any of the previous documents that other current and former commissioners have been referring to here?
I think it would try to replace or consolidate. I mean, it would certainly replace the 1980 plan in its entirety, and then I don't know what other information you were talking about.
Stuart has on occasions mentioned something that he and I believe Julie Hacker and Elliot Dudnick and Jack Weiss, I think, worked
Yeah,
on.
they have a really lovely set of procedural guidelines, which this would not replace any of
So
that.
this just really dovetails with that.
Yeah, it's kind of a totally different different animal, basically.
I had a couple thoughts. Looking at the 1981 plan had some real concrete goals. I mean, the most impressive being to have a preservation ordinance passed that would actually give them the right to approve building permits. I mean, I think that the more theoretical aspects of this are certainly great, and this. But I'm wondering what other, just more concrete and immediate goals there would be. On a related subject, there's a lot of talk in this draft about incentives and other things, so that we're not just approving or disapproving building permits. And I guess the most basic problem with what we do is our power is to kind of more coercive. It's to disapprove construction, alterations, demolition in, what is about 15% of the city, maybe, at the most. And, so the hardest question is, what can we do? We've got the whole rest of the city. What can we do to affect it? And I think in order to do that, you're clearly going to need something other than repeating that kind of more coercive structure, which I think has a certain level of unpopularity. And I know when we worked on the, I think Alec and I had worked on the African American historical designations. That Carlos was part of the meetings as well, and they clearly, the starting point was no ordinances that tell us what to do. And so I think that's the hardest part, is that we have a huge number of historic structures in Evanston. I mean, all the subjects of our downtown survey that are not landmarked, that are not protected, that we would like to find some way of protecting in some fashion. And it's probably not going to work to expand to create new historic districts. It's probably not going to get passed. And then, incentives are a great plan, but I think they're limited in what you can do, number one. And secondly, things like tax credits, property tax freezes tend to be accessed primarily by the people with the most money. It takes a lot of kind of resources and know-how to do those things. And so it's incredibly challenging to figure out, what concrete things we can do to effectively expand our reach. I mean, it's, my guess is when they put the clause in the 1981 plan about changing the ordinance so they actually had power, that was probably pretty close, and that there were models for it from other municipalities, and they were probably really close to doing it. So it was maybe easier to make that concrete goal than it would be to do something equivalent now. But I guess when I read this, I mean, it was great, but my kind of overall question was more about kind of, what concrete things can we do now to address these problems that are, maybe not, sooner than 2040.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think one of the biggest challenges I see for our commission and our city when we look at the preservation program is that it does feel like the weight of all of that is on a very small number of people and on the commission. And I think one of the very big challenges that would maybe have the largest benefit is creating more organizational capacity outside of this formal structure that you're talking about. Because I agree that this just resource management method, I don't know that, like you said, I don't know that another historic district will get nominated. It's like a different environment, but that's why, for example, conservation districts are more popular. It's an alternative tool that has very similar outcomes, but it's less restrictive. I think it's, along with that, there's a really significant educational component about what that is, how it's implemented. So I think, yeah, that's great feedback, and I think it's a significant challenge. I think that some of the things that kind of rise to the top to me that can happen quickly and impact the whole city, or like an adaptive use code, deconstruction ordinances, those type of things that don't necessarily rest with the commission ultimately. They're things that the commission and partner organizations can support, but they're not necessarily crafting it on their own. They're not managing those programs afterward. But yeah, the point is well taken. I mean, maybe we can identify some really more specific concrete things that could happen earlier, like you say, that are less like theoretical in nature.
I mean, I think it'd be great to have a part of the report that just, has some short-term, 2 to 3 year goals in it that
So-
are more concrete, that, fit within the larger context.
So I just wanted to point out that towards the end of the report, all the concrete things, all the actual action items are indicated by the amount of time we would spend, how pressing they are. And so, Kate, I wonder if what we might need is the same information, but presented the way it is by the here in the implementation, but sorted by the highest, in other words, it's the same information, but presented in 2 different ways, so that you can access it based on your interest in the goal, or based on your interest in, as Mark was saying, what do we do first? What is the most important thing? what's the thing we can do within 1 or 2 years? Because we do have some pretty concrete stuff, I thought, relatively concrete stuff that can be done right away, or can be started right away. But you have to sort through several pages worth here. I don't know, Mark, if that would help you to address your,
Yeah, I think it would. I also think, I mean, again, I think the challenge of what are you going to do to have effective conservation in 85% of the city that's not covered by the ordinance is a really hard one. And clearly there are pieces in the report that speak to that. I'm just not sure. I mean, you know, the hard part is the reality is that the coercive power we have to force people to to comply with the ordinance and to modify plans makes a huge difference. And I think, you know, again, things like incentives are good. I just, they're going to be really hard to make a difference with. And so that's, I mean, that's just a hard problem that, I mean, Kate, you're probably, I mean, you're generally familiar with ordinances all over the country. I'm just wondering if there are new solutions that you've seen or heard of in other places that we could borrow.
I think what you see primarily, and I think some of what the intention here is that preservation evolves to a point where you're preserving resources through alternative methods, basically, so not through the strict resource management. So that's some of the goals related to like economic development. You know, there's ways to preserve a building if it's not a landmark, and some of that is significant and appropriate investment in existing structures. So those would maybe never be on the register, but you're preserving that character-giving built fabric that exists in different ways, and maybe that's just our influence on economic development goals that exist in the city. So I think as you look across the country, they're broadening how they influence other divisions, other goals, other aspects. I don't think you see alternative models for really like the top-down resource management that we currently have, and it has been, you know, extremely effective here as well. I mean, that's another thing I think is just kind of telling the story. I mean, the story of preservation in Evanston is really significant. And the fact that we have close to 850 registered landmarks as a city this size is an amazing feat that happened. So I think it is about building local capacity outside of the commission. It's about looking at ways to influence other policymakers. And I think that work is maybe a little, it's more difficult, I think, probably. And that's part of the challenge, certainly.
I just had a couple thoughts on it. I thought that was great, Kate. Thanks for going through that. But the things, just a couple thoughts. And again, I need to go deep dive in this a little bit more, so maybe some of this is included. But Kate, you mentioned like telling the story of preservation. I thought that was a really good point. I was thinking there should be some like, I don't know, a little bit of marketing done, like around like what this organization has done in terms of like some of those before after photos maybe, or what would happen if we weren't here. Like you showed that beautiful picture and it's gone. Like, you know, I don't know, I'm not really sure. You said there's data on how many since the, you know, how many things have been saved or preserved, or, you know, it's just some like bullet points, some talking points on like all the positive things that have resulted in having like a preservation strategy in Evanston. So people get outside of this, the coercive point I think you were mentioning, where you just say yes or no on a design. Like just keep in mind, I came from a Kellogg background at Northwestern, so marketing is everything. Like I just think that that's more could be done around sort of marketing and like telling the story like you were saying. The other thing I wanted to mention, when it said, I have 3 like school-age children, it mentions education. My head immediately goes to kids. Like when we craft that story with pictures, like is there an opportunity to go into like District 65 schools or local schools and like get kids when they're young and be like, look at, you know, Evanston is this crown jewel. Like we have all these beautiful resources at homes and buildings and legacy businesses. Like kind of get them like excited about it, like at a young age. Like I don't know if that's like commissioners going in or like people from the historical, not society, I forget what they call it here, but you know, someone, History Center, thank you, going in and talking at the schools. I don't know if that's a field trip, like, I don't know if, I mean, the other thought is at the library, if there's programming, or they have some historic pictures, we could like put more stuff up. I'm not really sure, but like, that just stood out to me as like an opportunity we would have, sort of catching them when they're young and like getting an interest, and maybe that would also help with, like, the other thing that really pops out to me is like inclusion. That's obviously something I think that there's opportunities for diversifying, like us, or also bringing in those points of views, even if they're not sitting at this table with some of this. Like, I know, Carlos, you sent out that, potential grant ideas. I don't know if maybe, like, there's an opportunity to source some ideas from the community, like maybe through the different wards, like go to the alder people and make it, I don't want to say a competition, but ask them to source from their wards, like reach out to their wards and say, hey, people in my ward, like, is there a property you think would fall into these guidelines? There's money on the table we can apply for. I mean, maybe some of the action items could be like grant writing, like maybe we want to try to source a certain like dollar amount of grants every year or 5 years, or I'm not really sure, but it just feels like there's opportunities for some of these things. And I think, I don't know, that was kind of my stream of thought. I don't know. There were some other, I have notes all over here, but those are just my initial thoughts, yes.
I'll respond a little bit. So in terms of youth, 4.6, develop a pipeline for bringing youth into the local preservation community, such as inviting groups of ETHS students to commission meetings, an internship program for regional college students, and teacher professional development and curriculum opportunities with District 65 and ETHS.
Great.
That was listed as medium, 5 to 10 years. And then we have different things. That is page, 72
I don't
of
even
our
know if it
packet.
needs to be like that long-term, though, 5 to 10, I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
that's how long, so, Kay, do you want to talk about the amount, the years, why it's like that?
Yeah, so there's two separate categories here. One is a priority level, so that's low, medium, high, pressing, and then there's what I call the implementation timeline. And I think it's like 0 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus, or I don't remember the categories exactly. Now, the priority level doesn't necessarily associate it with near-term implementation. You could have something that's a really high priority, but you think realistically it might not be implemented for 10 years. That may also be because there's initiatives before it that have to be, you laying the groundwork for this to be possible. And I think some of that goes back to what Commissioner Ziem said. I think one of the most important things and one of the biggest challenges is how do you reach out to the community? How do you build that preservation ethic? How do you increase your education and advocacy components? Because it goes then to Mark's point, if you don't have that buy-in, that general buy-in, that understanding of why these things are important, it makes everything more difficult to implement. And that's something that I think the commission did really well in the 70s and 80s, partly because they didn't have binding design review. So they spent a lot of their energy on other aspects of preservation programming. And because of the sheer number of resources that we have in Evanston, once they achieved binding design review, it became almost all-encompassing. That's what took their time and energy. So you see a lot of these education and advocacy efforts kind of go by the wayside. At the same time, and this is a nationwide trend, preservation partner organizations and nonprofits are largely inactive across the country in most places. It's very difficult to bring youth into preservation. Some of the ways that they're successful at doing that is tying it to climate resilience and also affordability goals. There seems to be a connection and buy-in with a younger audience to the way that preservation can contribute in those respects. I don't know if that answered your question. I think that probably.
Then I wanted to just remind us, I guess, that the 4.1 reinstate a quarterly preservation and design-oriented newsletter and make it available on social media. That was designated as a pressing concern, which might be addressing some of the stuff that you were asking about. So 1 to 3 years on that. And there were a few others under the education and advocacy that were pretty concrete and considered to be relatively important. And then I wanted to mention that inclusion is, inclusion, we talked at length about this, and trying to find as many opportunities as possible, I would say, right, Carl and Kate, to bring this in. And I am not going to touch on all of them because there are many. But I did want to just note, Kate, where is this now? 2.12, which is on page 66 of our packet. Actively recruit future commissioners with a focus on building a membership reflective of Evanston's diverse demographics. That was considered a high priority. We all know that that has been a challenge in the past, but we made it a priority, a high priority, ongoing, and hopefully that's speaking to something that you mentioned in your comments. There are a few other places. You know, I want to, if you're interested in inclusion, I would encourage you all to look at each of these action items and stuff, because there's quite a bit in here, and then just if there's something missing, let us know.
I think one of the things that we've already done that's in here is pressing, which has already proved very fruitful, is Carlos has done a wonderful job kind of organizing all the partner organizations, and we have monthly meetings now. And that's something that I don't think that happened previously, right, Carlos?
No, this is relatively new. I'm trying to have a consortium of local organizations that in some way or another have to do with historic preservation, culture. And what we're trying to do is broaden the base so that it's not just the Preservation Commission worry about these issues of historic preservation. There are limitations to what as a consortium can be done, but at this point my strategy is to support each other from the events that they sponsor, from the Mother's Day walking tour to the Wheeler House open house. And also we could piggyback with Dina Robinson with the markers. And we will try to continue open the doors for other organizations like Design Evanston is not involved yet, not because of, we don't want to, we're just beginning to think about what other organizations should be part of this. But there's a point where you have to recognize that the commission cannot do everything for everybody. We had to get the community involved, and we can support their goals as well. So, just the beginning of this, and I'm hopeful that eventually, for instance, we're talking about the Design Awards program, apparently has become somewhat unpopular in some areas or with some individuals in Evanston, because it's kind of perceived to be not inclusive, not equitable, and only the people who can afford preservation projects are submitting nominations. So that's not necessarily true, but that's the perception that we have to deal with. So by involving these organizations being maybe the sponsors of the program, not just the City of Evanston Preservation Commission, we need to look at cost, what it takes, to put together the program, the manpower that we'll have. I don't think we can ask these organizations to do something that don't have the budget to do or the staff to do. But I think we need to kind of partner with them in some way. So we're still kind of figuring it out, how that's going to happen.
I was just going to say, for the record, the organize a preservation consortium or preservation advisory subcommittee is item 2.10. and it was indicated, it's page 66 of our packet, 28, I guess, right, Kate, of the thing that you posted. And it was indicated as pressing and ongoing, this, that Carlos is doing.
So that's sort of the short-term goals that could be, kind of not only started, but hopefully be successful at really permanently have a consortium. The other thing I just want to mention, my understanding is that back in the 80s, there was a educational program that was put together by one of the former commissioners where District 65 was involved and interested in pursuing educational programming with the, young children. I attempted to reach District 65, I don't know now, a few months ago, but I never got a phone call back. So I guess it's time to call them again and see if they're interested. I didn't really elaborate. I just left my name and who I was and what I was trying to do briefly, but I think probably was about time the timing was not perfect, but we can see because you had to integrate either the curriculum, what they have, or have like a program where families show the children for extra after school programming. We can attend a lecture by somebody, not part of their curriculum necessarily. One of the things I learned over the years is that there's a distinction between an advocacy group or an organization like Landmarks Illinois or the History Center versus the Commission. And I think that if we have very limited resources here. We have the 11 commissioners and staff. And we have very the goals are really important to think about and have a new plan, and that's something that we've been trying to do for all these years. But if we focus on what's most pressing, it can be achieved without necessarily taxing too much to the commission or staff, I think might be another way to look at it, because a lot of these things that we talk about here are done by private not-for-profit organizations that actually benefit from this directly with selling tickets or tours or something like that. I don't think we are in the business of doing that necessarily. So we had to kind of determine, what's our role. All the things that you listed in the plan. By the way, I want to say that I'm blown away by all that's right. So I want to thank the commissioners who participated, and obviously Kate, who's spearheading this. So my comments really are related to my experience with the commission over the years and working with the citizens of Evanston and the elected officials. We need to be very strategic how we move forward. But being a long-term plan, it doesn't mean that shouldn't be part of it. It's just where we put it and when and how we achieve that. And of all the achievements the commission was able to reach with the 1980 plan is that, we have a historic district that is part of the plan, but in many ways, if you look at that district, it doesn't really need our help in some ways. It's a beautiful area, it's a nice neighborhood. People maintain their properties really well. And I would not be surprised if there's a district there the way that we have the traditional district where we actually have to review and approve plans. I don't think necessarily that the people in those areas would be in favor of it. So you have to also start with the education, not only for the children, but also for the property owners or young families, where they will feel the benefits of it, and also maybe be part of the contribution that a citizen can provide to its own community. So that's the challenge that we have. We're not always understood. Many times we are misunderstood. My experience working with the commission, in most part, has been very very, what do you call it, high level of satisfaction, but there's also a level of frustration many times where the commission or our staff or ordinance is misunderstood or misinterpreted, or somehow it doesn't fall in good hands. And we are the victims of that. You hear mostly on the press when the commission denies something and it's being appealed to the city council, but we don't hear the other 200 projects that the commission approved, you know? So that's kind of the imbalance that we have, unfortunately. So I see in this program ways that we can improve that. The other thing that we have to change is, what qualifies someone to become a commissioner. So currently, we are asking people to have either architectural background or planning background or something of that nature. And if we want to reach to the others, a bigger umbrella for everybody to participate, then maybe we have to have a program that if you're interested but you don't have the background, maybe you have to train people to become commissioners, not just the person who's an architect or realtor that knows about buildings, then we give them the orientation. I think that's important. But if we want to reach a wider audience, the commissioners and immigrants, for that matter, we had to give them the tools to become commissioners. So that's another goal, perhaps.
I don't really know, I'm not going to try to find it right now, but I do think that part of the goal was to have a certification program, I guess at Northwestern or Oakton Community College, to, so that people could get a certificate. And there was also an aspect in kind of like training or having a workshop with real estate agents here in Evanston, so that educating people that want to move into the community, like, if they, just a workshop to help with that. I know you already have a breakfast annually, but just something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And the welcome letter is already
the
proven to
welcome
be
letter is really
successful,
good.
too.
So
I
there-
think this is a very important document, and I just want to encourage to continue. Maybe it's just moving every stone that you can and see what's underneath.
There is the 4.5, support the creation of a network of current landmark owners and a welcome program for new homeowners was one of them, but there were a few others under there as well. I recall talking about the work that I have done in the past with realtors at some point in all of this. One thing, Kate, we talked a lot about when we were putting this together, to remind ourselves that this long-range work plan is not like it's not our work. It's the work, the like bigger work of preservation in the city. So, I know that you have responsible party and potential partners and all that stuff, on every page. So it's there, but maybe in the midst of all of the other things, there might be some way to like bump it up, its presence a little bit, so it's clear that we're not expecting future commissioners to take on all this work, right? That this is a vision. The other thing that I was going to say was when Carlos was talking about, I've forgotten exactly, I'm sorry, Carlos, what you were saying exactly that brought me to think about this, but number 2.11 on page 66 of our packet, page 28. Benchmark commission accomplishments and performance trends in an annual public report. Beth, I think you were the one that talked about this at some point, and so that was pressing. We indicated it's pressing and ongoing. And I think my personal feeling about this is that achieves a number of goals. Part of that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, just the transparency, the commitment to transparency in that, I think. But also then it serves as a kind of educational document. You can see what we've done. Everyone can see what we've done. And so I remember now. Carlos, you were talking about that the press only sees the things that we don't approve. And what about all the 200 projects that we have approved? And those would be in this. Mm-hmm. And then it would be something that would be marketed or shared in some way. So, right, am I summarizing this correctly? Carl and Kate, that was part of the DEI transparency commitment to education, all of that stuff, that particular line item, correct?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also think that now that this is a public document, I think we have to intentionally make sure that we are sharing it with those communities so they can have their feedback before this is, approved, so that we can, just like, so that it's already, it's already been a part of the process of drafting it, but I think they need to be, now that it's a public document, included publicly in, in that process, just so that we can, start laying the groundwork for, reaching out and including them. So, I think there's a lot of building trust and, building relationship with everyone in the city, just so that this can be successful. Because like you said, this isn't just a commission thing. This is, for the whole city, not just commission, not just elected officials, but partner organizations and neighborhoods and block clubs, whatever. So, yeah.
I just wanted to say too, Carlos, I maybe am the only one on this panel, but I'm not an architect, nor am I a real estate agent, so I think that work is, I'm starting right here. In terms of like expanding like the criteria for like who is eligible for being on the commission. So that's good.
Yeah, I think that would be a way to be more inclusive.
Yeah, and that's even part of the transparency as well, is maybe even just documenting what kind of commissioners we've been having, and just going back to kind of like that, the idea of like a dashboard that we would have on our website about our cases and whatnot. I think that's just there's many ways to use that data, and just one of them is to identify our trends, our performance trends, what is, what's getting through, what's not getting through. That can help people figure out what kind of windows always pass, what kind don't. There's just many different ways that you can use that. But then also it can take a look, I don't know, but it could identify some biases that we have too. So there's all sorts of ways that once we get this going and then really making it available, we can draw from it.
Currently, I'm working on a document that has evolved from standards for everyone to look at for the looking at the ordinance, to a document that's now a manual for owners and architects and builders to see how they can be to show them how they can be successful. So we're not necessarily looking at the commission to administer this or staff, but it's going to be for anyone who would like to learn more about historic preservation or how to be successful in their applications. From my perspective, I keep changing my mind so many times, because once I get to a point, I think of something else that it should be part of it, and then that affects whatever I wrote for. So I'm trying to make it sort of a document that is friendly to the user, and also instructive, so that they don't feel that they waste their time reading. And they don't have to read the whole document necessarily to get to the point. If section about windows, a section about roofs, and so on and so forth. And also I want to thank Kay, because he kind of gave me the blueprint initially, how to get started, and we're working on it, and very soon I'll get back to the original group that was asked to participate with their comments, and that's what I got from them every time we met. They didn't want to see the standards. They felt that we had enough of that. So we'll get the manual done before the end of the year. And that's another short-term goal that I think is part of the master plan.
If you, there's a 4.4, which is page 33 of the work plan draft and page 71 of our packet. prepare a preservation training publication. That's what you're talking about, effectively,
Yeah,
right?
it's a preservation manual, right?
And one-on-one orientation for elected officials, which is something that we talked about a little bit, I'd say, right, Kate? Like, that's intentional that those two things go together. So it's a training manual for people who live in the city, who are the property owners, and then a training manual for the elected officials to help to bring everybody up to that level. We identified that as pressing 1 to 3 years.
If I may, every time there's a new election and you have new aldermen, or in this case, council members now, it's an opportunity for the commission to give them the information that they need to respond to the challenges of historic preservation in their wards, whether or not they have historic districts or landmarks, because they had a vote. So if a project is not affecting them directly, if they have the information that the commission could impart to them after the election, I think that would be a good strategy. And I know we have to be very, very diplomatic about this. So I'm not trying to impose anything. I just want to give them information that they can use in their awards. So I think that's important.
I think that's a pretty good discussion. So I think we can pick up from those comments and go from there.
So if I may ask, if we take some more time, read it through, if we start developing comments, should we save them for the next discussion, or should we go ahead and send them out, or how do you want to kind of collect and work through some comments as we go through?
I think my feeling is it's probably more efficient to collect those beforehand. And then if some are duplicative or repetitive, I can kind of distill that information, and then maybe I can present what the significant comments were. I think some of the points that were made, I think, are somewhat just the document itself. I agree that it can seem really overwhelming at first, probably. Something that's projecting 20 years in the future can seem very nebulous in a lot of ways. I think what I've seen sometimes is listing which initiatives are actionable and which ones are more like a conversation that you're engaging, you're starting a process, which ones are actually actionable and pressing. I think that might be helpful. And then maybe a different way to organize them just by which ones are pressing, just list all those out. But yes, if you have a ton of comments, just send them to me. You can call me, you can email them. And just based on the timeline, it might be something that we don't have significant revisions by October. This might be something where we're collecting a ton of feedback, ruminating over it, and then present a revised draft in 2 months or something. I think seems realistic.
Kate, I'd love to see, maybe I missed this, a timeline, a visual timeline.
Yeah, that's pretty
Is it,
typical. It's not in here, but
Okay.
yeah.
Great.
Okay. If there are no other discussion items, Carl,
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
is there a second?
I second that.
Sarah seconds, all in favor? Aye,
Aye.
thank you.